Hello and welcome back to the Student Hub Live. This session is about how to fight fake news with trusted content. Now, as you may have gathered, we've selected some wonderful topics and asked the experts in various areas of the Open University to come and explain some of them to you. And I'm joined by Wendy Chalmers and Helen Clough from the library, Chalmers, sorry. We're going to be talking about fake news. Now, there's been so much discussion, well, for quite some time actually now, about fake news. And I wanted to ask how our students can feel confident about any content that they read online and that they might want to use in their assignments. I mean, how can they know whether or not this can be trusted?
Oh, you're right. There's been fake news is a really hot topic, much debate about whether it's influenced the EU referendum and the US elections.
Yeah.
But fake news is nothing new. We talked to Helen earlier about back in the Roman Empire, Octavian spread fake news about Mark Antony, suggesting that he's going to leave some of the Roman land to Cleopatra, and this was spread by messenger throughout the Roman Empire, so partly leading to the downfall of Mark Antony. So Octavian was doing this to discredit his rival, but it's different nowadays because fake news spreads much more quickly. Social media, you can share news on social media without checking the references. However, it's not just fake news that's the issue. It's the misleading headlines published in newspapers, and it's an accurate reports, bias reports, which is freely available on the internet, and anyone could add information to the internet, and it's so easily accessible. So we really need to think about how we can address these issues, and Helen might give you some more examples.
Yeah, we thought it might be nice if the audience could maybe send in some examples they've come across of fake news. I mean, probably the most famous one is, do you remember in Panorama in the 1950s, they did the spaghetti trees video on April Fool's Day? If you're not familiar with it, then you can just, Google it and you can find the video, but that's a really famous one. One of my favourites is there was a report that 5 states in the US were going to ban the hobby of cosplay, which is dressing up as your favourite fictional character. And a lot of people believed that this was true. But if you actually go to the About page on the website, it does clearly explain that it's a satirical website. So those are examples of ways that fake news has been used for entertainment purposes, but also it can be used maliciously. It can be used to influence elections, but also to generate revenue. So you can see a lot of these sensational and provocative headlines on Facebook that encourage you to click on it, and that's called clickbait. And actually the owners of the website, they get paid every time you click on that link. So that's something to bear in mind.
Wow.
But if we expand the concept of fake news into misleading headlines, then that becomes much more relevant at university study level. For example, earlier this year, there was a Danish study published all about chocolate eating habits and heart disease. And the headlines, the newspaper headlines that came out of this were really misleading. So there was one in the Daily Mail that said, eating chocolate 6 times a week prevents heart disease. Right. And if you actually read the research in the British Medical Journal, that's not what the researchers are saying. But what happens is that researchers send out press releases to journalists, and journalists, they need to make this research sound exciting.
Yeah.
Exactly, because they want to sell newspapers. They want people to click on their website to generate ad revenue. So it's always worth bearing in mind that at university study level, you need to always have a critical eye. And we have developed and we publicise some evaluation frameworks that help you to critically evaluate this information. So Wendy's going to talk about the first one.
Okay. So this is who, why, when framework. So these frameworks are very useful if you want to not to be taken by fake news and you want to make sure you're picking good information for your assignment. So first of all, the who of the who, why, when. You're thinking about who published it, who's the author, are they an expert in their field, or do they have any personal biases? The why, on many websites you'll find an about section, and that will explain the aims of the website. So whether, for example, it's crisis or shelter, and their aim is to look at the causes of homelessness and and prevent homelessness, or if it's a website such as the African Eurasian Waterbird Agreement, and they're there to protect those birds. So there's a lot of great information, freely available information, but you do need to apply these criteria. What their intention is, isn't it? Whether they're to promote something. I mean, they may be there to promote the sale of biscuits, but it's quite important to understand the why of the why the information was produced. And finally, we have the when, and that's looking at the date. Is the information up to date? Was it published 2 or 3 years ago? So that's quite important. Criteria. And we can't talk about trusted content without talking about Wikipedia, because that always comes up in this context.
Topic, especially an academic one.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is a criteria you can apply to Wikipedia, because one of the first... Wikipedia is a source, a very popular source, and many people will turn to it, myself included, because it's so easily accessible. But one thing to remember is that anyone can contribute. They're not necessarily an expert in the field, and topics which are popular may have very lengthy articles. They are subject to misinformation. But there are also guidelines. Some of the guidelines are, they're supposed to be objective. There's no original research, and everything should be supported by references. Everything written should have a reference, and it's really useful if you look at that reference, if you can follow that up. And that's something you might be able to use the Open University Library for, is where you might find some more trusted content.
Yeah, we would always recommend you use the library's content, because it has been selected for quality, and also to match the OU's curriculum and research as well. So we would recommend that new students just go to the library website. You'll see a library search box on the homepage. Pop in your search terms and see what you get. You really can't break it. And the kind of content that you will come across are journals, books, audiovisual collections, newspapers, both current and archive, and also tabloid and broadsheet as well. And a great alternative to Wikipedia is the reference collections. So we have things like the Oxford English Dictionary. There's a collection called Very Short Introductions, which is a great sort of mini introduction to a subject. And then we also have the subject collections as well. So, for example, you might have used the Dictionary of Psychology in your role as a psychology tutor. And we have arranged our content by subject as well on the library website. We've picked out the most relevant resources for a particular discipline. So I would say use the library content. There's something called peer review as well that's worth being aware of. The articles that are in our reference collections have been written and reviewed by experts. And we also have access to peer-reviewed journals, like the British Medical Journal, where that research about that the Danes did about chocolate and heart disease. So you can actually read the original research and come to your own conclusions about what it's saying. And peer review is, again, it's about the work has been reviewed by experts in the field. So you can more or less guarantee that it is trusted content. Having said that, even at university level, you need to learn not to take things at face value. You know, you need to be critical of everything you're reading and putting into your assignments. So we have another evaluation framework that's a little bit more in depth called PROMPT. So you might want to use that for the more academic material.
So, as Helen said, even though you're using trusted collections such as the Open University Library, students will still need to pick the most relevant and appropriate information for their assignment. And so once you've done your search, perhaps using library search, you can have a look at this criteria, and you will find more about these criteria on the library website. There's more information and in the links associated with this.
Some of them, I mean, this one is used in one of the modules I teach on SDK 228, so some of them might be embedded within a module.
Yes, they're very popular, and particularly level 1, level 2 modules. And they are applied to different types of sources, not just journal articles, but a whole range of sites, even audiovisual visual material. But first of all, the presentation, you're looking at the clarity of the language. It could be, or it could even be a website. You're looking at how easy it's to navigate the website, the layout. But principally the clarity of the language, how clearly the author communicates their ideas. The relevance, that's the relevance to your particular subject. So whether it's the right geographical level, the right academic level, whether it's more relevant to a PhD student or a level 1 undergraduate, and also whether it's the right emphasis on a topic. I mean, one of my examples is illegal drugs. Is it the social costs, the psychological effects, or the criminal? There's just different aspects of a topic. Objectivity, you're looking to see if there's any bias and whether any of the arguments are supported by evidence or if they're simply masquerading as opinion. Method, you might be looking at the sample size, whether it's representative. Provenance, similar to from the who, of the who, why, when. Who's the author? Are they an expert in the field? Or is it published in a peer-reviewed journals? As Helen mentioned, they're written in theory by experts, but reviewed by other experts in their field. And finally, the timeliness factor. Again, looking at the publication date. Is there more up-to-date information which is more relevant? And this does depend on the topic. In many subject areas, there are many classic articles which can be old, but it's still equally valid. But it's just something to take into consideration. So that's the prompt criteria.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, you asked our audience earlier about whether they'd heard of any fake news, and they've all been chatting. 95% have already found the library website, but I would like to talk to you about some of the aspects on that in just a short minute. There's a real range of students here, again, predominantly at level 1, but a lot of social sciences, STEM and art students. So again, those sort of subject-specific disciplines will be really great for finding definitions of things that you might want to outline in your assignment. So that can be brilliant. Although, of course, whilst the library is an amazing resource, we must sort of encourage students to use it appropriately and not just go off and say, this is a brilliant essay title, I'm going to go here, because often they'll need to rely on some of the module material and really read the assessment guidelines as well, because it's all too easy to get lost in library search with fabulous articles. H-Day, what is everyone chatting about at home?
We've got a lot of thoughts about fake news. So US election always comes up when we're talking about that. Joel's been fooled by fake news. I've been fooled by fake news. Claudia says sometimes data and statistics are misused to give to drive a certain agenda. And Angela, about the who part, says with some fake news articles, she's seen that other articles written by this person had said that Dutch teachers had eaten children. So, perhaps looking what else they've written might help. And Joel says some sites are a bit tricky because we've got a lot of satire these days, so trying to work out whether it's satirical or not. And Natalie says, is fake news as new as I think, or is it just a big thing lately? Has it been spread more online, or has it always been around? And Ruth says, consider who funds the research as well and who the researchers work for. So that might help, because just talking about in the US, there's been some studies looking at law research and how that seems to be a bit skewed sometimes. So it's I think we've got some very good tools from the library that we'll post in the chat as well that we can use to help us assess this information.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, lots of chat. And apparently News Dumper isn't the best source of material for your essays. So, but is it the case with this fake news? Because so much of it, like from the gossip that we were talking about earlier, the fact that things are printed, the fact that sometimes they can have this academic language, the fact that sometimes you can read in a newspaper a glass of wine a day is good for you, or a lot of chocolate, and we've got this bias and this sort of thing. Yes, that supports what I believe. I'm not going to look into it any further. Yeah. So we can sort of see how this works just in terms of a social level and confirming our biases. But equally, sometimes students will think, I'll just put that in my assignment. Yes. And you've mentioned some of the ways that you can check some of those aspects in terms of the evaluative frameworks and also references on Wikipedia. But Wendy, you did say that you use Wikipedia as well. So I just sort of wanted to touch on when these things were good, because I use Wikipedia as well. I never refer to it in anything I write, but sometimes it's really helpful to watch a YouTube video on how to do something or to get another source of information, because it can help shift your thinking. So these sources do have their time and place. And I wonder if you can tell us about what you would recommend in terms of their use.
if I'm sitting in the living room, I want to know something, I want to find out something quickly, I will go to Wikipedia. But at the same time, I find some information. I do sometimes take it with a pinch of salt and think, well, I might check that further in perhaps a reference source in the OU library. Another one I go to is Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah,
so it's a really great reference source, another that you could dip into quite easily and find some really useful information. And so it's good background information, just sort of bite-sized information, just to get you started. And then if you want to go further, you can start looking for ebooks, using library search to find one of the thousands of ebooks which are available on the subject, and also journal articles as well. So it's a starting point, I would say, for any research. But remember the alternatives of the library reference sources as well, which are fantastic.
Yeah. What would you say, Helen?
Yeah, I would say also there are fact-checking sites out there that you can also visit, like the NHS Behind the Headlines is a great one. So if you read that headline in the Daily Mail that said eating chocolate 6 days a week will prevent a heart attack, maybe go to the NHS Behind the Headlines site and see what they're saying about it, because they actually pick apart the research and they analyse it, and then they draw another research, and they give their considered obviously expert opinion as the NHS. Another one is More or Less on Radio 4, which is actually an OU co-production, and I download their podcast, and it's a wonderful source because basically they go behind the statistics that you find in the headlines and analyse whether or not they're actually correct. One of my favourite episodes was all about the number of people in the crowd at Trump's inauguration.
Right.
That was fascinating. So yeah, I highly recommend that. Another well-known one is Snopes.
Yeah.
BBC News and Channel 4 News both have their own fact-checking websites. So have a look at those sites as well.
Because it's all about being critical and recognising that everything has a given time and a place, and from the knowledge is generated from a certain perspective. And I guess that's the take-home message that we're encouraging students to think about, is that whatever you're reading, even if it's a piece of module material or it's something on Wikipedia or somewhere else in the newspaper, think about why it's being written, what basis there is really for that claim, and does that evidence actually support that claim? And that's the whole sort of cycle that we go through when we're studying, isn't it? With varying degrees of complexity. Yeah. Okay, excellent. I wanted to ask about how people can access help and support from the library as well. And I know we've got some other sessions tomorrow from the library, so we'll be telling you all about that. But briefly, what are some of the ways that we can sort of access the library help and support in terms of this whole subject of fake news? Because you're doing quite a bit on this.
We are. So we did a series of Facebook Live videos back in May that are now up on YouTube, and you can also find them on the library website on the Training and Events tab, all about how to spot fake news. Yeah. So have a look at those videos. Yeah. Remember that we have a help desk, and you can contact us via the web chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When we go home, you're put through to a partner librarian in the United States. So take advantage of that. And we have various source guides and help and support articles on the library website. So do have a look. And the online training sessions. So
yes, you've got
tonight,
yes.
They're 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
You don't need to book, you just turn up. Tonight we've got two, one on referencing and one on using library databases.
Brilliant.
And then tomorrow evening I'm doing a couple. I'm doing one is an introduction to the library services, so that might be a good one to attend if you're new to the OU. Yeah. And then after that I'm doing all about library search.
Brilliant. And where are these happening?
So you can find links to them on the homepage of the library website.
Oh, so they're online?
Yes, sorry.
Brilliant.
I didn't say that. So yeah, live and online, and
Great.
we use Adobe Connect, which is the OU's new tool for
Also
tutorials.
a fab opportunity to try and get into that tutorial room that you'll be using as part of your studies as well. And we've put the links, I think, on the abstract for this session. So they're on the resources page of the Student Hub Live if you do get stuck. But yeah, turn up to those. They'll be brilliant.
And also to mention the Being Digital site, which is available from the library. That's a collection of, sort of bite-sized activities. And there's the Trust Online pathway, which has various short activities on evaluation frameworks and some hot tips.
Lovely. Excellent. Well, there's going to be a lot more from the library later today, but we've had a lot of chat going on as well while you've been talking. It's really, really lovely. We'd all like to see a picture of Edward's new study. So, Edward, if you could send us a picture by any means, really. Email is studenthub@open.ac.uk, or you can send it to us on Twitter @StudentHubLive, and the hashtag is StudentHubLive17. So we'd love to see your new study, and if you've got a nice study area as well, why don't you send us a picture, and HJ can put that on the board a little bit later. Jane says she'd like to know whether chocolate helps you study. Well, Jane, stay tuned for our next session, because I've got some of the sport and fitness team coming to tell us all about this very popular topic of conversation. But Wendy and Helen, thank you very much for joining us today. And do check out those events at the library on the website. They're really, really brilliant, and they're a great way to be shown around and also to meet other students as well. OK, we're going to have a quick video, which is our library tour video, and then join me afterwards for our next session with Ben and Natalie, where we talk about nutrition and sleep.